Talking all about Hurricane Performance's 230 horsepower tune for Skidoo's 900 Turbo. What it is, what I like, what I don't like, the pros, the cons, what do I think 2 years later, and how did it change my life? All right, this man changed my life. All right, sounds pretty dramatic. I know. This man, Dave Marshall, he's all about speed. I mean, he's got world records for speed on sleds. You know, that's his thing. But it was never about speed for me. I enjoyed opening it up every once in a while, going on a lake. Whatever speed it gave me, I was okay with. I was never like, hey man, I need more speed. Maybe I was lying to myself a little bit, you know, oh, I'm getting old. I guess I shouldn't enjoy speed anymore. I don't know. So then fast forward, when I decided to start the channel, I was making some decisions based on the sleds that I liked, that I enjoyed, but also something that would bring more attention and stuff that you guys would want to see. And the spring prior to me starting the channel, there were two big BRP announcements. And the first one was that they were bringing back the Mach Z. So it seemed logical to me that, yeah, maybe I should go after that. It's a limited edition. It's only going to be available for 1 year. So if I can get my hands on one, if I could get it early, bring some content to you guys, that was kind of the mentality. But I wanted to bring two sleds to the channel because I wanted to give one away. So that gave me a very unique opportunity to bring in two very different sleds. And the other thing that was new for that year was going to be the first year that Lynx was going to be available in North America. So what perfect contrast to the 4-stroke Mach Z would be the Lynx Rave 850 2-stroke, so both 137 tracks, but very, very different sleds. And because I wasn't necessarily focused on speed, I really didn't know at the time which sled I would prefer. And quickly after the first few rides, it became evident. As soon as I heard and felt the turbo, I mean, that's kind of what converted me. I was like instantly in love. At that point, I decided, all right, I'm giving away the Lynx and I'm gonna hold on to this Mach Z, and I'm probably going to have this for a while. Once the Mach Z started getting delivered, unfortunately, I was not one of the first ones. I think I put my deposit down on the very last day, so there was no surprise there. Plus, we were right in the thick of the COVID supply shortages, so things were slowing down drastically. That being said, you know, a few videos were coming out here and there about the Mach. I was getting excited, and as people were coming back, people were, you know, some people were super excited, but there's a big portion of people that were also disappointed because they thought that this was gonna be like the muscle sled that they've been waiting for, and it was not that different than the existing 900 Turbo that they were off. So then that got the wheels turning a little bit more. All right, what can I do? Should I be looking at performance upgrades? So that's when I started digging. And I'm like, surely there's gonna be some tune available. Turns out, not really. At the time, nothing was available. And the only glimpse of hope for that first season was Hurricane Performance. Hence when I first contacted and talked to Dave. We got on a call, I explained to him, hey, here's the deal. Will you allow me to film at your shop? Ultimately here, I'm looking for content. I think that people would be interested in learning about this and seeing how it goes, especially that it's, you know, the first ones to market. And we never talked about discount or any special pricing or anything like that. I just said, what do you recommend? He said, this is the package. I said, awesome. Can I go there? Can I film the process and then post that online? He said, yep, absolutely. I drove there, filmed the whole thing. When it came time to pay, Dave ended up giving me a small discount, which I appreciated, wasn't expected, or we hadn't talked about it. But what I loved about Dave was his forward thinking at the time. I mean, he knew that this new Mach Z was coming out. He buys one of these Mavericks, and all summer long they're testing, they're developing this brand new ECU from scratch so that they can in fact be first to the market. And oh yes, were they first? And that's when he changed my life. So why do I say that? It's because it wasn't as if I was riding the sled and I was disappointed. Trust me, when that sled first hit, I mean, I loved it. And if it wasn't for this channel, would I eventually have called Dave? Maybe, probably. But I know for a fact that that first year I wouldn't have. It's this channel that got me calling him. And then once that was installed into the sled, that's when my life was changed. And yeah, man, I love the speed now. Like, it's a whole new world when you're riding such a capable machine. It changed me. I don't know if it's for the better. Cool thing is, there is a fun video if you want to check out the actual moment that Dave changed my life.
Yeah. Okay, ready? Let's go. Woo! Yes, sir! There's the feeling right there. Oh, yes.
So typically I don't like quoting prices on these videos because I like to think that these videos are going to be watched for years down the road and then the pricing might not be accurate. So keep that in mind. And the pricing from my invoice is actually from 2 years prior. So the list of my package at that time was, of course, the ECU, the Hurricane mid pipe, the Hurricane clutch kit, the Machine 41 tooth bottom gear, and then I also purchased the full Sandale exhaust but didn't install it at the time. Brought it home, drove it without the exhaust, and then eventually put the exhaust in and ultimately loved it with the Sandale. I've kept it ever since. That's a one piece that also includes the mid pipe. Rode it basically like that for the full first season, and then last season called Dave, said, I think it's time we do the 250 kit. At that time, he's like, you know what? I'm already kind of developing a 300. Maybe you want to hold off. Maybe we do that next season. I said, all right. Yeah, twist my arm. So that's what we agreed. But at that time, he said, one thing you do need that's really important to make sure that the engine doesn't heat soak. He said, you need this new intercooler. So sent me that, swap that out, and that's how I rode it all of the second season. Okay, let's talk about some of the not so good stuff. The first one for me was the very first morning I brought it home. Didn't bring it in the garage, just stayed outside. It was a cold night and had issues starting it. One, for a little bit, hold, wouldn't start, let go. So I did that maybe 2 or 3 times if I remember correctly. Cold. And then later on in the season when temps got warmer, I also had issues there. So it seemed to be basically like at the two extremes of the warmer temps and the really cold temps. And one of the most common questions that I was getting from you guys at the time was trying to address this. Not once did it ever leave me stranded or did I feel like it wouldn't start. That wasn't an issue. I never had that problem. It's just, it wasn't like first time every time like the stock tune. That's since been fixed, but I'll cover that a little bit later. The next glaring one that came obvious to me was no Mac capability. So Dave has the ability to log in remotely to our sleds, but in order to make that work, you gotta plug a laptop in the sled to enable the internet connection that way. And unfortunately, it's got to be a PC, and for most, that's probably not an issue, but there are no PCs in my house. Everything's Mac. When Dave has had to plug in, and in 2 years, I think we've done this 3 times. I've had to borrow computers from friends or neighbors. Next up here, I have the first iteration of the tune did not have an eco mode. So it was basically in kill mode all the time, which for riding is fine. The only time I was having issues with that was loading it and unloading it off trailers or the truck or in and out of the garage. It's nice to be able to feather that throttle a little bit more in those scenarios. This next one here is kind of nitpicky, but it's more about you guys and just letting you in on it and setting your expectations. I don't personally think this is a negative, but the next point I want to talk about is just the engagement of the clutch. Obviously, the stock setup is designed for all types of riding and has a super smooth engagement. It feels refined and all. Now, when Dave makes the changes to the clutching, of course, it can handle more power. The power delivery is set up totally different. Like I said, this is really not an issue for me. It's just something that you should be aware of. If you are very particular about how smooth you want the clutch to be, I'm sure you could talk to Dave and he can come up with the proper solution for you guys. All right, and the last one, same thing. It's kind of a negative. I've got to mention it, but I mean, it comes with the territory. you want to play with bigger power. It's going to take a little bit more fuel. I would say that on average, it's, you know, slightly less than 10% if I had to guess. I didn't keep concrete data or evidence of this, but I've got a couple of screen caps here. This is one of the last rides from the end of the season that I did with Ali. She was riding Gen 5 850 Renegade, and then I was on the Mach. She definitely doesn't ride as fast as me, plus she was on the 2-stroke, but this kind of gives you an idea of the ballpark after one of the fuel stops. You know, we filled it up right to the brim and then stopped at fuel stop. She put in 27 liters and I put in 31. Be aware, yeah, it's gonna take a little bit more fuel, but nothing crazy. So I already mentioned that the first year the Mach came out, that the only option was Dave's option. Since then, there's some competitors that have come around, and there are essentially 3 different types of ways to tune the Mach Z nowadays. So I just want to quickly go over those before going in what I feel are the advantages of Dave's approach. First one would be a piggyback unit. This is stuff that's been going on in the car industry for years. It's basically something that goes in between some components and the stock ECU, kind of like tricking and manipulating some of the data to, you know, add more fuel or more air to increase the power to the sleds that way. I'd say that's kind of like my dumbed down version or explanation of the second way is to modify the stock ECU. That entails removing the stock ECU, sending it to a company. They'll actually unsolder a chip on the motherboard and then solder this new chip where they can program it. And lastly, which is the way that Dave does it, it's a standalone ECU, meaning that it's a completely new and aftermarket ECU. So BRP ECU comes out, this one goes in its place. So I don't typically like to shit on anybody else's product, and that's not really Dave's style either. But what I want to do is just kind of list a few of the advantages that I think come from going with the standalone. The first big one I'd say is that the possibilities are virtually like limitless. And what I mean by that is if you look at any serious race car out there, or I'm sure a lot of my viewers are Hoonigan fans, so if you look at like the Hoonicorn, like cars like that are all run on standalone computers, and that's just because when you're doing all of this custom and when you're pushing boundaries like this with race cars and high performance sleds like Dave is doing with now the 300 plus horsepower kit running off of this ECU, it just seems like it makes it kind of future proof. Next is just how easy it is to update the tune remotely. So I mentioned this earlier, all you need is a PC, an internet connection, and a Cat5 cable to plug into your sled. And then Dave can remotely log in and then upload a brand new version of the tune of his file. The next cool thing is being able to swap it out back to factory without much trouble. So I do not condone doing this to trick a dealer into fixing something that shouldn't be fixed under warranty. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm gonna give you a situation. When my Mach Z was first delivered, they were delivered without the desk post because of supply shortages at the time. So fast forward, parts guys at Algonquin call me to say, hey, we got the desk posts in, just drop your sled by, we're gonna install it in, and then we just gotta program it real quick, no problem. So in that particular case, I was able to unplug the Hurricane ECU, popped the stock one back in, started the sled like nothing happened, brought it to the dealer. They programmed the desk, got home, swapped the ECU, called Dave, hook up the PC, he programmed it. All is well. And kind of along the same lines as that, and what I would say is probably the biggest selling feature to this is that it's removable and swappable. So what does that mean? You want to upgrade to the new G5 or something like that? I don't know. But that's an asset that you get to keep. Doesn't have to stay with the sled and sell it off. You can pull it out, put the stock one back in, sell the sled, and transfer that ECU to the new sled. You'd have to call Dave. I think it would have to be reflashed and things like that, but can be done. What great peace of mind knowing that all this money that you're investing in this part, you're not going to lose. You could be able to swap that out or even sell it on its own. Now there's another huge point, and it doesn't directly have to do with the ECU. It's more Hurricane as a whole, but I talked earlier about calling Dave, and that's the thing. He's virtually always reachable, and if he's not, he's gonna get back to you. Like, customer support and customer satisfaction to him means a great deal. I mentioned programming the desk key earlier. When that happened and I needed it programmed, I had a ride that was coming up and it was kind of last minute, and I called Dave and it had to be done on a Friday, and I knew that the odds were slim that I would get it done, but I thought I'd give it a shot. So I called Dave, he didn't answer. I left him a message saying, hey, I know it's a long shot, this is the scenario, no worries, if you can't get it done, we'll talk on Monday, I understand. At that time, Dave was on a boys sled trip with his buddies in Muskoka. Actually, like, his first time ever going on like a weekend trail ride with his buddies. But he calls me back and he's like, yeah, no problem. He's like, let me log on right now. I'm like, what? You got your laptop? Yep. Yeah, they were at the house. He pulled the laptop out. He got me going. That's just the type of guy he is. He stands by his product. Him personally. He knows how crazy us sledders are, and he knows how passionate we are, and he wants to help us, and it's evident in what he does. Lastly, reliability. I've had 0 breakdowns in 2 years. If I really have to nitpick, the little bit of starting issues, but that's since been fixed. He's constantly updating the tune. But when I say reliability, it's not just the product itself, like the ECU, there hasn't been any issues with the hardware, but also I'm talking about the tune. It's really important to Dave, for us, his clients, to not have breakdowns. He knows how important that is. He knows the places that we're riding. He knows that it's, you know, we're just gonna have pump gas. So he wants us to have as much power as possible, but be reliable on pump gas. That's extremely important for him. And I can vouch for it after 2 years with 0 issues. And so has there been hurt motors over the last 2 years? Yep, there has been. Dave doesn't try and hide from that. He's told me stories of a few, and he's told me all the mistakes that he's learned from with those motors. He's told me how he's made it right with those customers, and that's just kind of the price of being first. Basically, all these stock components have a threshold, and Dave's trying to get as close to that threshold as he can with keeping it as reliable as possible. And when you're firsts, you're most likely gonna have more issues. Also earlier I mentioned Dave updating the tunes. I messaged Dave and I said, hey, can you give me a list of everything that's been updated throughout the course of these 2 years? He didn't come back to me with a complete list, but he came back to me with kind of some of his highlights. He's got overheat shutdown. He's got the desk key security improvements. He's got added boosts with overboost protection, changed things to get cooler pistons at wide open throttle. He adjusted the curve to allow for smoother sport mode throttle. He actually added eco mode and then smoothed out the curve. He added boost display. You can actually get a live reading of the current boost value, which is pretty cool. Enhanced knock protection system, enhanced intake air safety protection, and then lastly here he's got improved cold starting up to -40 with smooth idle. And the cool thing is that list is gonna keep growing. Just like any other software or app on your phone, the more users, the more different scenarios are out there. There's gonna be improvements, and he's gonna provide those right back to you because he knows you've made the investment with him, so he's willing to be in it with you, which is a great strategy and a great philosophy in my opinion. So in conclusion, the Mach Z, the 900 Skidoo Turbo. It's a fast sled. It's fun. What does the Hurricane ECU bring you? Well, it brings you up to giggle level. That's basically what it does. Who's this for? Well, I'm thinking about those owners who have got these sleds for maybe 2 or 3 years. Your warranty's up, you're thinking, all right, maybe it's time I buy a new sled, you know, mix it up, get something new. You can do that. You're gonna get a horrible trade-in value right now because of the market. So why don't you hold on to that sled and put some money into a Hurricane tune? That's who I think. Sled's getting a little long in the tooth. Throw a little Hurricane action in there. Brand new sled. Let's go. No better time than now. Get it. All right, it's a slow start, but the season's here, boys. The snow has landed. Did I mention my sled's at Hurricane right now? It's probably on a dyno. Probably getting a little over 300 horsepowers. Stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, stick around. There's gonna be more Hurricane content coming up. Let's go, boys.